Here are all the things I meal prep to make my life a little bit easier as a family of 4. So before we headed off to church, I did make my turkey bacon, and I also made the dough for my cinnamon rolls. Once we got back home, I started on my apples so that I can make my filling for my cinnamon rolls. And these are the apples we picked a couple weeks ago, and I used the variety so I can get a more complex flavor. Just cook down my apples in some butter, some vanilla extract, cinnamon, nutmeg, as well as some vanilla bean and brown sugar. And once they were tender, I let them fully cool, and for the last 20 minutes, I did pop them in the freezer so that I can make sure that it was nice and stiff. I'm gonna roll out my dough. I added some cinnamon, nutmeg, and then I'm just going to put my apple filling right on top. And I'm going to spread that out as evenly as I can, roll it nice and tight, cut them into 12 almost even pieces, and let them rest for about an hour. Now moving on to my first meal prep, and I really want to do a salmon bake, but it was just too many steps and ingredients for me. When I am making things from scratch, I have to balance out my meals so it's not too much prep and too many steps because it can be overwhelming. So I just cut them into cubes and just seasoned it really well. And I did have some seaweed strips for when I originally planned to make my sushi bake, but I figured if I cut them into cubes, I can at least use them to pick up the cubes. I ended up putting some Mandarin sauce on top, and I just paired this with some rice and some lima beans. Now I'm just seasoning my chicken with the same seasoning, and I'm going to make chicken 2 ways. I'm going to use some of my chicken to make chicken wraps. I always try to have extra chicken or steak on hand, so if I don't want to have a meal prep, I can make myself a quick wrap or salad. And then I'm going to use the rest of the chicken to make chicken and dumplings. This is also one of my favorite meals to have in the fall because it's just so comforting and it makes me feel so cozy. So I'm going to start by cooking down my onion, celery, and carrots, and then seasoning that really well. And this recipe calls for chicken bouillon and water. But of course, I always swap out the water with bone broth so I can get that extra protein in. Now I'm just dropping in my biscuits. I'm going to let that cook until my biscuits are done. And then I'm going to also ice up my apple cinnamon rolls. And those came out perfect as well. And that's everything I meal prep to make my life a little bit easier as a family of 4.